The scent of homemade lasagna filled the air as I sat at the familiar dining table, surrounded by the faces I'd known all my life. My younger twin siblings, Noah and Nina, exchanged smug glances across from me, their eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that sent a chill down my spine. My parents, seated at either end of the table, wore expressions that were difficult to read, a mix of resolve and something else, something colder. Noah leaned forward, his voice dripping with arrogance as he spoke. Just so we're clear, Emma, he began, his tone laced with a condescension that made my stomach churn. We wanted you to know now so there's no confusion later. Everything goes to us. His words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stared at him, then at Nina, who wore a smirk that mirrored her brother's. The room seemed to spin as the weight of their words settled over me. Everything, the house, the lake cottage, all of it was going to them. I was being cut out, discarded like I meant nothing. The lasagna, which had moments ago been a comforting reminder of home, now felt like a lead weight in my stomach. The silence that followed Noah's declaration was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside the suburban cul-de-sac. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of their betrayal. Excuse me? I managed to choke out, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to steady it. What do you mean, everything? My mother interjected sharply, her smile fading into a thin, hard line. Exactly what he said. Emma, she replied, her voice devoid of warmth. Your father and I have decided to finalize our will, and we wanted you to hear it directly from us. The house, the lake cottage, all of it is going to Noah and Nina. I turned to my father, desperate for some sign of hesitation or regret, but his gaze was fixed on the silverware in front of him, avoiding my eyes altogether. The silence stretched painfully, each second feeling like an eternity as I waited for him to speak, to offer some explanation or comfort. But none came. Emma, you have to understand our reasoning, he said, folding his hands slowly on the table. You've done extremely well for yourself. Your mother and I are proud of your career and the success you've built. Noah and Nina, well, they're still finding their footing. They need more support. His words stung like a slap in the face. For years, I quietly shouldered the family's financial burdens, believing it was my duty as the oldest child. Their house payments, Noah's endless tuition changes, Nina's whims and costly hobbies, all quietly covered by me. Apparently, none of it counted for anything. I blinked hard, fighting the hot sting of tears that threatened to spill over. My heart twisted bitterly as I looked at my parents' face, their expressions hardened against me. It was a betrayal sharper than I'd ever anticipated, a knife twisted deep into the core of who I was. So this is my reward, I demanded, my voice low but firm, for spending the last 4 years paying your mortgage, for the tuition bills, for the $30,000 I put into renovating that lake cottage last summer. You're leaving me nothing because I made something of myself. My mother sighed dramatically, shaking her head. This is exactly why we didn't want to tell you. Emma, she said, her voice laced with exasperation. You always bring it back to money. It's never about family with you. Heat surged into my cheeks, my fists clenched beneath the tablecloth. It was always about family for me, I countered, my voice trembling with emotion. Every sacrifice I've made was because of family, because you asked, Mom, because you said family sticks together. Noah scoffed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms smugly. You're acting like some martyr, Emma, he sneered. Nobody forced you to help. You just like playing the hero. Nina laughed quietly, twirling a strand of her glossy hair around one finger, her eyes narrowed with amusement. Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us, she said, her words cutting deep into the wounds I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. The cruelty of her words stung, reopening old scars and leaving me raw and exposed. My parents didn't react, their silence louder than any defense they might have mounted. They'd always indulged Noah and Nina, protected them, excused every irresponsible choice. Yet here I sat, after years of sacrifice, being painted as greedy and selfish. Anger flared through me, scorching away the last threads of patience. You're right, Noah, I finally said, forcing my voice to remain steady. No one forced me, but from today onward, no one can guilt me into being this family's ATM either. I'm done. I pushed my chair back and stood abruptly, ignoring the surprised looks on their faces. The scent of marinara and baked garlic lingered in the air. a cruel reminder of what I'd foolishly hoped would be a comforting family evening. Instead, I'd been ambushed, humiliated, and rejected in the same home I helped pay for. As I grabbed my coat from the hallway, the front door swung shut behind me with a definitive thud, cutting me off from the voices inside, voices that no longer mattered. Outside, the cool Portland air hit me sharply, helping clear my head, but my heart still felt raw, aching with disbelief. Back home, my apartment felt strangely unfamiliar, as if everything around me was tainted by this revelation. I poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet, the expensive one I'd saved for special occasions. Somehow, tonight's bitter lesson seemed fitting enough. Settling onto my couch, I opened my banking app. The recurring monthly payments, $1,800 labeled parents' mortgage, another $600 for their utility bills, stared back at me from the screen. Without hesitation, I canceled them both. A quiet defiance bubbled through my chest as the confirmations flashed. As the evening faded into night, I replayed the dinner conversation obsessively, my anger giving way to deep sadness. The rejection wasn't just financial, it was emotional, a lifetime of feeling second best finally confirmed openly. Yet, even amidst the hurt, something new stirred within me, a sense of liberation, a realization that my worth wasn't defined by their acceptance. It was time to reclaim my own life, free from expectations and obligations that had become chains around my spirit. I knew my parents, Noah and Nina, wouldn't let this go quietly. There would be calls, arguments, perhaps even retaliation. But tonight marked a turning point. No matter how hard they pushed back, I vowed silently to myself that I was done being their victim, done quietly accepting disrespect under the guise of duty. From this moment forward, my life was my own. And as I drained the last drop of wine from my glass, I found myself smiling bitterly into the darkness. My family had invited me home to announce they'd left everything to Noah and Nina, but they'd given me something far more valuable tonight: freedom. The days following the revelation were a blur of anger, hurt, and disbelief. I found myself constantly replaying the dinner conversation in my mind, each word echoing like a harsh accusation. The weight of my family's betrayal pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe, hard to think about anything else. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from my family, each one a relentless attempt to manipulate and guilt me back into submission. My mother's voicemails were filled with a familiar mixture of exasperation and guilt, her voice echoing the same refrain: Emma, please stop being so dramatic. Call me back. Family doesn't treat each other like this. I let each call go to voicemail, unwilling and unable to hear her voice. I knew that engaging with them would only drag me back into their toxic cycle, and I was determined not to crumble beneath their practiced guilt trips. My father's messages were stern and demanding, his voice brittle with forced calm. He insisted that I see reason, that I understand their decision, but I couldn't see past the pain they'd inflicted, the deep wound of their rejection. Noah and Nina chimed in as well, their messages alternating between condescending lectures and sarcastic pleas. They accused me of selfishness and jealousy, their voices laced with mounting irritation that their financial lifeline had abruptly vanished. But beneath their anger lay desperation, a sudden realization that I was serious. Finally, after a particularly bitter call from Nina accusing me of selfishness and jealousy, I blocked them all. Peace fell over me for the first time in years, fragile and unfamiliar, yet beneath the quiet relief simmered a dull, persistent ache. I threw myself into work as a distraction, finding solace in the familiar routines and demands of my career. Bennett Construction's latest project, a sleek medical office complex in Sacramento, demanded my full attention. Meetings, blueprints, client walkthroughs, all things I'd always handled with grace, now felt like desperate escapes from the reality waiting for me outside office hours. 3 weeks passed without direct contact from my family, and I began cautiously hoping they'd accepted my decision and moved on. But deep down, I knew better. It was Friday afternoon when the text came flashing ominously across my screen. Family meeting tonight. Emma, you owe it to us to be there. My heart rate spiked as I stared at the message, disbelief warring with outrage. I didn't owe them anything, not anymore. But curiosity mixed with a misguided hope for reconciliation, not at me. Before I could overthink it, my fingers typed a single word reply: fine. Pulling into my parents' driveway that evening felt surreal. Noah's flashy motorcycle and Nina's obnoxiously blue Kia were already there, parked side by side like matching symbols of entitlement. Dread twisted sharply in my gut as I approached the familiar front door, now feeling as foreign and unwelcoming as an enemy's fortress. Mom opened the door, her forced smile barely masking irritation. Emma, glad you decided to come, she said stiffly, ushering me into the house I once thought of as home. Daisy's here too. My Aunt Daisy sat quietly in the corner of the living room, her eyes warm with sympathy but wary. Her presence surprised me. She rarely got involved in family conflicts. I took a seat across from her, heart racing as my siblings entered the room, openly glaring. Dad cleared his throat. We called this meeting to clear the air. He began sternly. Emma, your mother and I thought you'd see reason by now. Obviously, we were mistaken. I bit back a sharp retort, clenching my fist tightly. See reason, my voice shook, despite efforts to control it. You cut me out completely after everything I've done for you, every mortgage payment, every tuition check. And you want me to see reason? Stop exaggerating, Mom snapped, rolling her eyes. You helped, sure, but it was your responsibility as the oldest. Noah and Nina deserve stability. It's not our fault you chose work over family. A bitter laugh burst from my lips. I chose work over family, I echoed incredulously. I built my career because you needed my money. I skipped vacations, friendships, relationships, all so you could maintain this illusion of security. Oh, spare us the dramatics, Noah scoffed. We never asked for your pity or charity. That's right, Nina sneered. Maybe if you weren't so busy being the family's savior, you'd have your own life by now. Heat flooded my face, humiliation swelling painfully beneath my skin. Aunt Daisy shifted uneasily, but said nothing, her silence as loud as a scream. My parents remained silent, faces stony, eyes turned away from me once again. I stood abruptly, chair scraping harshly across the hardwood floor. You know what? You're right, I finally said, forcing my voice to remain steady. It was my mistake to believe I mattered here. I won't make that mistake again. As I reached the door, Dad's voice cut sharply behind me. If you walk out now, Emma, don't expect to be welcome back. I paused, my hand gripping the doorknob, a lifetime of suppressed anger finally bubbling to the surface. That's fine, I replied coldly, my voice shaking with controlled fury. I've never felt welcome here anyway. I sat in darkness, the silence now strangely comforting, wrapping around me like a protective shield. A quiet knock on my door startled me, sending adrenaline coursing through my veins. Cautiously, I peered through the peephole. Aunt Daisy stood there, worry etched deeply on her face. Opening the door, I let her in wordlessly. She immediately embraced me, warmth and comfort radiating from her gentle hold. I'm sorry, Emma, Daisy whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They're wrong. You deserve so much better. The words cracked something inside me, and the tears I had held back flowed freely. Daisy held me tightly, allowing me to release years of pent-up pain and bitterness. After a long silence, she finally spoke again, her voice filled with conviction. They won't ever admit it, but they're scared, she said softly, gripping my hand reassuringly. Scared of losing control, of facing their mistakes. For years, the recurring payments stared back at me like silent accusations. $1,800 for my parents, $600 for utilities and bills, plus countless miscellaneous transfers labeled simply family help. My cursor hovered over the cancel button, my breath shallow and uneven despite my anger and humiliation. Guilt twisted painfully in my gut, whispering old lies of responsibility and obligation. I hesitated, my mother's voice echoing in my mind. Family sticks together, Emma. Family sacrifices. Yet tonight had stripped away all illusions. Their betrayal, dismissive and callous, revealed the stark truth. I'd become nothing more than their financial convenience. I squeezed my eyes shut, Noah's mocking smirk flashing vividly through my memory, crystallizing my decision in a painful clarity. With one decisive click, the mortgage payment vanished. Another click, and the utilities payment stopped too. My phone buzzed insistently, jerking me awake. Dread pulled instantly in my stomach. Unsurprisingly, my mother's name flashed across the screen. I took a steadying breath before answering. Emma, what have you done? She demanded, skipping any greeting. Her voice quivered with rage. The bank called. They're threatening foreclosure. You had no right. No right. I interrupted, my voice surprisingly calm. Mom, I paid your mortgage. Voluntarily. But after what happened, I'm done being your financial crutch. You're our daughter, she shrieked. You owe us respect. I owe you nothing, I countered sharply, anger igniting again. Respect isn't one-sided. You made your choice. Now I've made mine. Emma, she began again, desperation leaking into her tone, but I cut her off firmly. I'm sorry you're upset, Mom, but I can't do this anymore. Goodbye. I hung up quickly, my hands trembling. The calls didn't stop. Each one from Dad, Nina, even distant relatives, was a relentless attempt to manipulate, guilt, trip, or shame me back into submission. Eventually, I silenced my phone, feeling oddly empowered by the quiet rebellion. Weeks passed and life slowly regained balance. Work became not just a distraction, but genuinely fulfilling again. I booked the trip to Italy I dreamed about for years, savoring the freedom to finally spend my hard earned money on myself. A new sense of independence filled my days, though loneliness occasionally crept in at night, a harsh reminder of family ties severed. The days turned into weeks, and I began to find solace in the silence that had once felt so oppressive. My life was starting to feel like my own again, filled with choices that belonged solely to me. Work was no longer just a distraction, but a source of genuine fulfillment. I found myself looking forward to each day, embracing the independence that came with being free from my family's financial burdens. Then came the Friday evening when everything changed. I returned home from a 3-day work trip to Sacramento, exhausted but content. As I approached my apartment door, I noticed something was wrong. The door frame was sealed shut with thick, hardened foam, expanding grotesquely around the edges. My stomach dropped as I realized what had happened. I touched the foam, it was dry and rock solid, intentionally sprayed into every crack and crevice, ensuring I couldn't enter. Panic surged through me, quickly replaced by anger. Only one person came to mind capable of such cruel, petty sabotage: Noah. I immediately dialed building management, pacing furiously outside my apartment. After what felt like hours, a weary locksmith arrived, shaking his head sympathetically at the extensive damage. He carefully chipped away at the foam, murmuring about the deliberate nature of the vandalism. As someone really didn't want me inside, he observed grimly. My blood boiled at the thought of Noah's smug satisfaction as he sprayed my doorway shut, punishing me for daring to stand up for myself. By the time the locksmith finished, the clock read nearly midnight. Inside, adrenaline kept me wired, anger burning too intensely for sleep. Sitting down at my computer, I remember my hallway security camera, heart racing as I pulled up the recorded footage. I searched anxiously until a familiar figure appeared on the screen. There he was, Noah, baseball cap pulled low, hooded sweatshirt obscuring his face, yet unmistakably him. My stomach churned as I watched him systematically sabotage my door, expression gleeful and malicious. Betrayal struck deeper, now raw and fresh. This wasn't just financial spite, it was personal and intentional cruelty. With shaking hands, I saved the footage, rage solidifying into determination. I hesitated momentarily, grappling with the reality that this was my brother. Could I truly turn him over to authorities? But this went beyond family squabbles. Noah had crossed the line from selfishness into criminality. I called Aunt Daisy, seeking guidance. Emma, she said gently but firmly, if you don't hold Noah accountable now, he'll never learn. Protecting him isn't kindness, it's enabling. Her wisdom steadied me, and with deep resolve, I filed a police report the next morning, handing over the footage as evidence. My family's outrage exploded in a torrent of furious voicemails flooding my phone, calling me vindictive, heartless, a traitor. Yet beneath their anger lay desperation, a sudden realization that I was serious. No longer controllable, Noah faced real consequences, charges looming unless restitution was made. Dad finally called, voice brittle with forced calm. What will it take, Emma, for you to drop the charges? He asked. $3,000, I replied instantly. The exact cost of repairs. That's extortion, he barked indignantly. No, I answered coldly, surprising even myself with the strength of my voice. It's consequences. Noah vandalized my home. Either he pays or he faces the charges. It's his choice. He hung up abruptly. The following morning, a transfer appeared in my account, exactly $3,000, labeled bitterly as final payment. Despite their evident resentment, victory surged within me, not because of the money, but because for once, I'd forced them to acknowledge their actions had consequences. Noah's petty vandalism hadn't destroyed me. Instead, it crystallized my newfound independence. No longer shackled by their selfish demands, I finally began reclaiming my life. Standing alone in my repaired apartment doorway, I took a deep breath, savoring the bittersweet victory. Yes, my family had betrayed me, hurt me, pushed me to the brink, but they'd unknowingly set me free. And now, at last, I could build a life on my own terms, answering only to myself. After Noah's vandalism, my family's silence felt deafening. Days turned into weeks without contact, no angry messages, no desperate pleas. At first, their silence seemed a relief, but soon it morphed into a constant, oppressive reminder of what I'd lost. My parents had chosen sides, and once again, I wasn't the one they picked. Then the rumors started. Aunt Daisy called late one evening, her voice filled with quiet urgency. "Emma, your mom's been talking," she said, her tone laced with concern. "She's telling everyone you've abandoned them, that you're trying to make your parents homeless." My heart sank. "That's ridiculous," I whispered, gripping my phone tighter. "They left me no choice." "I know that," Daisy soothed gently. "But others don't. They think you're selfish, that you stopped helping your family out of greed." The accusation twisted painfully in my gut. My parents were rewriting history, painting me as the villain, their martyrdom complete. My years of quiet sacrifice, countless canceled vacations, delayed personal goals, all erased as if they'd never mattered. I paced my apartment restlessly, anguish giving way to a fierce need to reclaim my voice. After years of obedient silence, I was done letting others define my story. Determinedly, I sat at my laptop, fingers flying across the keys as I composed a detailed post for Facebook. I laid bare everything: the monthly mortgage payments, Noah's tuition, irresponsibility, Nina's endless demands, even the damage Noah had caused. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every ounce of quiet resentment poured out onto the screen. My hands trembled as I clicked post, releasing years of pent-up hurt into the open. Within minutes, comments poured in, reactions swift and divided. Some expressed shock and sympathy, horrified that I'd been exploited for so long. Others scolded me sharply, accusing me of airing private family matters publicly. Then came my mother's furious voicemail. "How dare you humiliate us like this? You have no right," she hissed bitterly. Her indignation triggered something primal inside me. "I have no right?" I shot back angrily, calling her immediately. "You lied to everyone. After all I've done, you labeled me selfish, a villain just to save face. You abandoned me the moment you decided my efforts meant nothing. You taught Noah and Nina entitlement over responsibility, and now you're paying the price? You've destroyed our family," she whispered coldly. "No," I replied softly. "You did that yourself." I hung up, heart hammering, tears blurring my vision. Guilt twisted within me, painful and persistent. Had I truly destroyed my family by refusing to accept their betrayal? Was it wrong to stand up for myself? Finally demanding respect, a knock startled me from my spiraling thoughts. I opened the door to Aunt Daisy, concern etched deeply on her face. Wordlessly, she hugged me tight, offering the unconditional support I'd longed for. "Emma, your post changed everything," she said gently, stepping inside. "Some family members finally see the truth. Now, your mom hid your contributions all these years. They had no idea." I sighed deeply, relief mingled with sadness. "Does it matter anymore?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Daisy insisted softly, gripping my hand reassuringly. "Your voice matters. You deserve recognition for all you've done. Your parents chose dishonesty, but that doesn't mean you have to live under their shadow anymore." Her words resonated deeply, planting seeds of strength in my battered heart. Slowly, the anguish began to fade, replaced by cautious hope. I was no longer hiding, no longer silent. The truth was painful, raw, but undeniably mine. The days following my public post were a whirlwind of emotions. The outpouring of support from friends and some family members was overwhelming, but so were the accusations and judgments from those who saw my actions as a betrayal. Despite the turmoil, I found solace in the truth I had finally voiced. The weight of years of silence and sacrifice began to lift, replaced by a sense of liberation and empowerment. Days later, I received a text from Nina, short and bitter. "Thanks a lot. Everyone hates us now. I hope you're proud." I stared at the message, feeling strangely detached. I'd spent so long chasing approval, craving their acceptance at any cost. Yet now, standing amidst the ruins of our relationship, I realized their approval was never genuine. It always came with conditions, sacrifices, strings attached. I responded calmly, confidently typing, "I'm done apologizing for your choices. Maybe now you'll finally learn responsibility." She never replied. Weeks passed, and the harsh judgments from distant relatives gradually faded. My parents struggled financially without my help, forced into part-time jobs and confronting debts they'd ignored for years. Noah continued his pattern of irresponsibility, refusing accountability, while Nina drifted aimlessly, angry but unwilling to change. Meanwhile, my own life blossomed quietly for the first time. My choices belonged only to me. At last, I was free. not just financially, but emotionally. I'd faced the painful truth, endured my family's betrayal, and survived through the turmoil. I'd uncovered a strength I never knew existed. My parents had thought leaving me nothing in their will would devastate me, yet they'd unintentionally given me the greatest gift possible, the courage to choose myself. 6 months passed, and my family's toxic shadow finally faded from my everyday reality. It wasn't easy at first. Silence haunted me like a ghost, reminding me of every lost connection, every damaged bond. But gradually, the sharp edges of betrayal softened, replaced by something sweeter, a realization that I'd finally broken free. I poured myself into my career, earning a promotion that came with a corner office and the kind of salary I once only dreamed about. For the first time, my paycheck belonged solely to me. No mortgage payments siphoned away my financial security, no frantic midnight transfers covering Lion's latest crises or Nina's impulsive desires. Each dollar represented freedom, proof that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. With newfound financial freedom, I booked a 2-week trip to Italy, something I'd long delayed out of guilt over spending money on myself. Standing on a balcony overlooking Florence's glowing skyline at sunset, I felt a profound sense of liberation wash over me. For the first time in years, joy wasn't shadowed by obligations or guilt. Back home, I joined a hiking group, finally reclaiming the weekends I had lost to family tragedy. On one such hike, I met Alex, whose infectious smile and thoughtful conversation were a balm to my still healing wounds. His quiet support filled the void left by my family, reassuring me that I was worthy of unconditional love. Months passed peacefully until one cold November evening brought an unexpected knock on the door. I opened the door to find Aunt Daisy wearing her favorite sweater, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Without a word, she walked inside and hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Emma," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You deserve all the happiness you can find." Daisy finally spoke softly. "Your parents are still blaming you for everything. They won't change, Emma. But you've grown stronger. You chose yourself. That's bravery." "I still think about them," I admitted quietly, emotions tightening my throat. Not because I regret walking away, but because it still hurts knowing they never truly loved me like I loved. Daisy squeezed my hand gently. "Sometimes family isn't about blood, sweetheart. It's about who genuinely sees your worth." Her words resonated deeply, filling a lingering emptiness I hadn't realized remained. As we talked late into the night, sharing stories and laughter, I finally understood. Family isn't defined by blood alone, but by those who truly value and respect you. On Christmas Eve, rather than dwell on regret or bitterness alone, I invited close friends over to celebrate friendship and independence. Aunt Daisy joined us, smiling knowingly as she watched me embrace a life I never thought I deserved. My parents tried to punish me by cutting me out of their will, but their betrayal had inadvertently given me something priceless, my freedom. In the end, my parents' rejection was my greatest liberation. They left everything they owned to Noah and Nina, but they gave me the opportunity to finally choose for myself. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have continued to provide for your family at the expense of your own happiness? Or would you have chosen to walk away, even if it meant losing them forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.